So lovely to see all of you here. Um, who am I? I'm Aditya Iyengar. I'm a novelist. I've written 4 books on mythology, and I spend a lot of time reading about mythology. I spend a lot of time learning about mythology, about stories from different countries, about stories from India, the likes. So it's safe to say I spent a lot of time in the past, like a lot of time, far too much, according to my wife, if you ask me. But yeah. Um, You know what we find a lot in the past and in mythology? Bridges and walls. And I'm not talking about the physical ones. You guys already know that. I'm talking about the mental and emotional ones. The bridges. By bridges, I mean the relationships we make with each other. Love. By walls, I mean the petty prejudices we often set up in front of each other. I'm also a bit of a data guy. And we live in a data-driven age. So if I were to extend this mythology, this data metaphor into mythology, I would say this. Mythology is the single largest source of information on human relationships that exists in the world. There is no other greater source of information about human relationships that you can find anywhere. And all of this is peer-reviewed. All of this has been analyzed, reanalyzed, written, rewritten, and it comes from 4,000 years ago. So, it's just constant churn of information that's been happening. The information that we have here is fresh and it's raw and it's valid. It's stuff that we can actually learn from. In fact, the Mahabharata has a really interesting quote regarding this. And the quote goes something like this. It goes, Yadi hasti tadanyantra yanne hasti na tatkochit. And that broadly means this. What can be found here can be found elsewhere. What can be found here can be found elsewhere. What cannot be found here cannot be found anywhere. And that is the beauty of mythology. All of life's answers can be contained within it. So what does mythology essentially teach us about building relationships, about finding love and building relationships with people? So I would like to leave you with 3 data-backed, research-proven tips on how to build relationships that are straight from mythology. And I'm not going to use Indian mythology per se. I'm going to use a mix of mythologies from around the world. So the first thing that mythology teaches us about building relationships is this. You can make friends with the unlikeliest of people. Keep yourself open to making friends with anyone because you can make friends with just about everyone. And the funny thing is, this is a lesson that comes from the oldest epic ever written. Like, I'm talking about the first story we have information from. This is like 4,000 years ago. It's a story called the Epic of Gilgamesh, and it is so old. It was written in Mesopotamia, and it is so old that we don't even know the entire story. But what we do know of it is beautiful. And the story goes like this. Gilgamesh is the king of this kingdom called Uruk. And he's not a very good man. He's a horrible person. He's bad to his subjects. Bad to his subjects to the extent the subjects pray to the gods and say, like, Bhagwan, hame inse bachao. And they pray and pray to the gods. And finally, the gods are also compelled to do something about it. So what do? They create another version of Gilgamesh, because Gilgamesh himself has superpowers. He's super strong. So they create a version of Gilgamesh, a wild man, as they call it. And he's a wild version of Gilgamesh. And they call him Enkidu. And they send Enkidu down to earth to nullify Gilgamesh, to slay Gilgamesh. And Enkidu has his own set of adventures, but eventually him and Gilgamesh fight with each other. And they have this huge fight that nearly wrecks the entire area around them. They land punches against each other, kicks against each other. They fight. The forest around them is broken because of the violence of their fight. And finally, they both fall down tired. At that point, Gilgamesh looks at Enkidu, and for the first time in his life, he feels something, a very strange emotion. And is this respect? This guy fights as well as I do. Maybe he's not such a bad guy after all. Enkidu looks at Gilgamesh. Well, you're not too bad yourself. They're building a bridge to each other. And Enkidu and Gilgamesh become friends. And they become really, really fast friends. They become really solid companions. They go on many adventures themselves. And what happens then is that the gods see them having fun together, and they see that, Enkidu's basically gone there. He was supposed to kill Gilgamesh and he didn't end up doing so. And they get angry and they curse Enkidu to die. Enkidu dies. And Gilgamesh is so torn by grief. And he's so torn by grief that he says to himself that, look, I've got to find a solution to this. The only solution is I will find the secret to eternal life. And what does he do? He does what any rational person would do in his place. He goes to the underworld. And, well, he goes to the underworld, he fights demons, and he goes to the source of eternal life. And when he finds the source of eternal life, the gods tell him, look, this is as far as you come, boy. We cannot give it to you. You will never have it. And it's at that point that Gilgamesh realizes that, look, I've done as much as I can do. I can't do anymore. Well, maybe I should just be happy with the life I have. And maybe I should, while I can't bring back Enkidu, maybe I should honor his memory. And so Gilgamesh goes back. And he goes to his kingdom and he resolves to become a wise and just ruler, and he becomes one of the best rulers of his era. And that's why the story is written about him. The great thing about Gilgamesh is that he wasn't really looking to find a friend in Enkidu. Enkidu wasn't really looking to find a friend in Gilgamesh. And yet they ended up finding each other. If they had been judgmental against each other, they would have probably, obviously, some guys come to kill you. Why would you want to be friends with him? But look how it all worked out. Now, I'm not saying that one should do this in all circumstances. Obviously, if someone comes to kill you, you shouldn't, make friends with them. But it's the beauty of the story. You can find friends in the unlikeliest people. Former enemies can become friends. So look at expanding your horizons, building bridges to other people. Even if you don't think they might be friends, who knows, you might find your Gilgamesh or Enkidu in them. The second great lesson that mythology has to offer is this, and it is always communicate. I can't stress how important this particular lesson is. If you look at all the mythologies of the world, they all have similar themes. One of them is brothers against brothers or family against family. That's obviously a very big theme in all mythologies. It's obviously important to all cultures. And that's why all mythologies have some version of that theme to educate people not to fight within their families. The second great theme that all mythologies have is always communicate. And again, we go back nearly 1,000 years to this story from ancient Greece. So in ancient Greece, the king of Athens was a man called Aegeus. Aegeus was one of the greatest kings of his era, and he had a son called Theseus. Theseus wanted to live up to Aegeus's name, and Theseus was an adventurer in his own right. Theseus goes on lots of adventures, he slays demons, he battles monsters, till the point that he comes across this one monster called the Minotaur. And the Minotaur is this monster that lives on the island of Crete. And the Minotaur is half bull, half man. It's a demon, and it feasts on human flesh. Theseus decides that he wants to kill the Minotaur. He decides that he wants to make himself a hero by killing the Minotaur. And he leaves, and he's leaving on a ship with black sails. His father obviously has conflicted feelings about this. He doesn't want his son to go and fight a demon. This is the toughest monster of its age. And he tells Theseus one thing: look, when you're going out with black sails on your ship, that's great. But when you come back, please put white sails on your ship. That way, I will know that you have survived and you are alive. If I see the black sails, I'll know that you have died. And Theseus pays heed to his advice and he goes off. And when he goes off, he goes and he has many adventures of his own, and he finally slays the Minotaur. He kills the Minotaur, and in that moment, he possibly becomes the greatest hero Greece has ever known. And he is coming back now to Athens in his moment of greatest triumph. He has overcome the greatest monster that Greece has ever known. He is the warrior par sans anything in Greece. And he comes back, but he forgets to change the color of his sails. His sails are still black. And he comes back, and his father is watching. His father has this ritual of going up to the cliffs and watching out for ships that come in every day. And his father sees Theseus' ship coming back, and it has black sails on it. So the father thinks that Theseus is dead. And that moment, overcome with grief, Aegeus throws himself off the cliff and he kills himself. Theseus left a prince. The prince wonder. He returns a king in the saddest possible circumstances. If mythology teaches us anything, it is this. Always communicate. Be clear in your communication. Know what you want to say and try to understand what the other person is trying to say. The third great lesson that mythology gives us is this. Don't let other people build your walls for you. And we're all experts in building walls ourselves, I know. But it's even worse when you let other people build walls for you. And especially in an age of fake news, of false information, of WhatsApp forwards, there's always some kind of information coming your way that tells you to look at people in a different way or be prejudiced against people and the like. And it's funny enough that this kind of message was spoken about even in the 13th century. And the epic that I'm talking about is this epic called the Prose Edda. The Prose Edda is the source of Viking manuscript. It's a Viking manuscript. It's a source of information for the Norse people. And contemporary audiences are possibly more familiar with it because these are the stories of Thor and Loki. So I'm sure everyone who's seen movies on the Marvel movies would be familiar with that. This particular story concerns Loki. So the story goes that the gods of Asgard, and Asgard is the home of the gods, it's like Vaikunt, and the gods of Asgard are trying to build a wall around their city. And they don't know how to go about it, and they appoint Loki as the chief procurement officer of this entire venture. They say that, look, Loki, you have to go find people to build the wall for us. Loki says, fair enough. At that moment, a mysterious giant appears outside Asgard, outside the realm of the gods. And he says that, look, I will build your wall for you, and I'll build it with the finest material known to man, known to anyone. No one will be able to breach your walls. It is a guarantee. And Loki says, fine, what do you want for payment? So the giant says that, look, I only want three things. I want the sun, the moon, and the goddess Freya. The goddess Freya is the goddess of fertility and is generally a very good goddess. So Loki says that, okay, you want a lot of really, really valuable things. You'll have to do it in less than 1/3 of the time that it takes to build a wall. The giant, without batting an eyelid, says, yeah, of course, I'll do it for you. I'll do it in the time you stipulate. If you tell me to do it in 2 months, I will do it in 2 months because I want the sun, the moon, and the goddess Freya. Loki says, all right, then we have a deal. And Loki goes back very happily to the other gods saying that, look, I made this deal for the sun, the moon, the goddess Freya because I know that this guy will not be able to complete the wall in this time. The gods are all right about it as long as the work gets done. The only person who's obviously not very happy about it is the goddess Freya because she's like, listen, why, what? And so essentially what happens then is that the giant starts building the bridge, the wall, and he starts putting one stone after the other. And when he's starting to construct the wall, he looks behind and he blows a whistle. And he whistles and this giant horse comes around to him. The horse's name is Swadilfari. And Swadilfari comes and it's a giant horse and it's dragging half a mountain behind it. The giant breaks the rock and Swadilfari kicks the rocks and breaks them to a serviceable size. The giant takes the rock and he puts it one on top of the other and starts building the wall. The wall starts getting completed in record time, 1/3, 2/3, 4/5, and the gods are just looking at this in amazement because they never anticipated this. They thought that the giant would take a longer time. The giant is almost finished building the wall in less than half the amount of time it's supposed to take. And the gods look at Loki and they're like, look, are we really going to give the sun, moon, and the goddess Freya to this? Goddess Freya, understandably, is very irate at this particular idea, and she doesn't want to go with the giant. So they tell Loki, boss, you have to solve this problem for us. So Loki is a trickster god. He's the god of mischief in Norse mythology. And he transforms himself into a mare. And the mare goes and it distracts Swadilfari and it drives Swadilfari away. So the mare and Swadilfari go in one direction, leaving the giant alone. Without Swadilfari, the poor giant cannot complete the wall, and the giant struggles. And finally, the deadline passes. And the gods go up to the giant and say that, look, you've not built the wall, so you're not going to get any payment. The giant gets angry, and well, there is a battle between the gods and the giant. The giant obviously loses. So what does this tell us? It tells us that don't let the Swadilfari and the giant of misinformation build prejudices for you. It's always easier to let other people build walls for you. And it's always easier to let other people's opinions sway you. But you really shouldn't do that. If someone's offering an opinion on another people, religion, caste, etc., you shouldn't take it at face value. You should analyze it for yourself, and you should build bridges of information for yourself rather than allow other people to inform your views for yourself. But here I'd like to also strike a cautionary note. While it is important to build bridges at all junctures, there will also be times in your life that you may have to either break down bridges or stop nourishing a bridge or build walls. And there's one text, and it's the most profound text in Hinduism that kind of tells us this, and it's called the Bhagavad Gita. And the Bhagavad Gita tells us this, that if you are doing something for the cause of good, even if you have to build a wall or burn a bridge between you and your family, then do what is right, do what is good. And this is fundamentally, while it is the most exceptional of cases, it is what Sri Krishna tells Arjuna on the eve of battle, that you need to follow your duty, you need to do what's right. In this particular case, it's possibly better not to nourish this bridge with your family than to do so. So these are the stories, these are the lessons that I have for you today for mythology.